It is easy today to think of laundry as something ordinary, a load of clothing, a switch of a machine, the faint scent of detergent filling the air. But before the hum of electricity, before the invention of steel drums and spinning cycles, washing was not a chore of minutes. It was an act of hours, sometimes of days. And before that, before soap as we know it, before woven linen and smooth cotton, there were rivers, stones, and the human wish to be clean. Let's travel there now, slowly, not with urgency, not as tourists, but as quiet observers, standing beside the water as history moves gently before us. The first cleanings. Imagine a shallow river in the dawn light, tens of thousands of years ago. The air is cool. Mist clings to the reeds. A woman kneels near the edge of the stream, rubbing a strip of animal hide against a smooth, flat stone. The hide had been worn for days, heavy with smoke, sweat, and earth. Now, as she dips it again into the current, the dirt lifts in slow ribbons, disappearing downstream. These earliest forms of washing weren't done out of vanity. They were acts of survival. Cleaning meant comfort. It meant the removal of smell that might attract animals, and it meant preserving materials for longer use. In prehistoric times, laundry was less about fabric and more about skins, furs, and fibers, softened in water and pounded clean. The first soap was not yet invented. Instead, people relied on what nature offered: sand, ash, and running water. Sand was used as a natural abrasive, the same principle that would later inspire lye soap. Ash, rich in alkaline salts, helped loosen grease and dirt. These small practical discoveries, the realization that ash and fat could clean, were the beginnings of a chemical relationship humans would refine over millennia. The act itself, though, was rhythmic: rubbing, soaking, beating, rinse. The sounds of it, the splash, the soft slap of wet fabric, the slow motion of hands, would echo through every civilization that followed. Egypt, linen and the river. Thousands of years later, along the Nile, laundry took on a more recognizable form. Ancient Egypt was a land of linen. Cotton and wool were uncommon. Wool especially was associated with impurity, but flax, spun into linen, was everywhere. The Egyptians wore light, white garments that gleamed in the sun, and these needed constant care. The Nile was not just the river of life, it was also the river of washing. Scenes carved into tomb walls and painted on papyri show men beating cloth against flat stones, their muscles taut under the heat, while others rinse, wring, and lay garments on the bank to dry. There were even professional launderers, a humble trade, but respected. Egyptian records mention the washermen and washerwomen of temples, responsible for the pure white linens used in ritual. Their work was not merely domestic, it was sacred. To cleanse linen was to restore it to purity, to make it fit again for contact with God. Soap, as we know it, still did not exist. Instead, the Egyptians used a cleansing mixture made from natron, a naturally occurring mineral of sodium carbonate, often mixed with lime or ash. The same substance used to embalm the dead was also used to clean the living. Natron dissolved oils and lifted dirt, making it both a cleanser and a preservative. Under the morning sun, linen sheets would ripple in the breeze. White garments would dry stiff and cool, ready to be worn again. There is something deeply peaceful in imagining that cycle. Water, stone, linen, and sun repeated endlessly through centuries. The Greco-Roman washer. By the time we reach Greece and Rome, washing had become a profession, and a curious one. The Romans called their launderers fullers. Laundry in Rome was no longer only about domestic cleanliness. It was industrial, almost urban. In ancient cities, phalanik public laundries lined the streets. There, linen and wool were washed, whitened, and pressed. But the Roman method might not sound pleasant to modern ears. Instead of soap, They used fresh human urine, collected from pots placed on street corners, was rich in ammonia, a natural cleaning agent. It cut through grease and stains remarkably well. In the Follonica, workers would pour vats of urine over garments, then stomp on them with their bare feet, pressing and agitating the fibers in a process that could last hours. Afterward, the fabric was rinsed thoroughly, treated with fuller's earth, a type of clay that absorbed oils, and finally stretched and brushed. The result was bright, clean cloth, ready to be worn by Rome's citizens. The fullers were essential workers of their time. Their job was not glamorous, but necessary. The Emperor Vespasian, famous for imposing a tax on the collection of urine, reportedly justified it with the phrase pecunia non olet. Money does not smell. Even here, in the bustling heart of Rome, laundry was still deeply physical. It involved water movement, rhythm, and patience. Though the tools had changed, the essence remained the same, the transformation of the unclean into the pure, through work and water. The East. Rivers and rituals. Across the world, in India, China, and Japan, washing was woven into both daily life and spirituality. In ancient India, rivers were not merely sources of water, they were sacred beings. The Ganges, most of all, was believed to purify not just the body but the soul. To bathe or wash in its waters was to cleanse oneself spiritually. Along its banks, dhobis, traditional washermen, would stand knee-deep in the current, dipping garments, scrubbing them against stones, and beating them rhythmically to release dirt. The sound of dhobis at work, the soft, repeated slap of wet cloth, became a kind of song across the subcontinent. This system remarkably has endured into modern times. Even today, dhobi ghats, open-air laundries, operate in India's cities, continuing a pattern thousands of years old. In ancient China, too, washing was both practical and poetic. The earliest records, from the Zhou and Han dynasties, mention women washing silk garments by riversides, using plant-based detergents made from soapwort, a foaming herb whose natural saponins could cleanse delicate fabric without damage. Silk, being precious, demanded care and patience. It was never beaten or twisted harshly, but instead rinsed gently, pressed between hands, and dried in the shade. In Japan, similar scenes unfolded. The riverside washer, or Sentaku-jo, became a recurring image in poetry, a symbol of purity, repetition, and feminine grace. The Japanese even developed a word for the serene sound of water during washing, Sentaku no oto, the sound of laundry. The smell of clean. Throughout the ancient world, cleanliness was not only about removal of dirt, but also about scent. The Egyptians perfumed linen with lotus and myrrh. The Romans smoked garments over aromatic wood to freshen them. In India, washed clothes were often laid over jasmine bushes or sprinkled with sandalwood water. There was a deep awareness of sensory calm, the feel of smooth fabric, the fragrance of the air, the look of whiteness restored. Laundry was slow, meditative, and physical. It required presence. Before soap, before machinery, before detergent bottles on supermarket shelves, washing was a conversation with the elements, with water and stone, with sun and wind. The rhythm of labor. We might imagine that such work was constant, but it often followed a rhythm tied to the week or to the position of the sun. Ancient households might wash every few days in small amounts, while larger estates or temples scheduled specific washing days. Because drying depended entirely on sunlight, people watched the sky. The arrival of rain meant delay. The stretch of dry weather meant opportunity. Laundry was a social act, too. Women gathered along riversides, chatting quietly as they worked. Children playing nearby. Elders watching from the shade. These were the first wash days, though they had no name yet. The sounds, the movements, and the slow passage of time, all these formed a kind of communal rhythm. Imagine the scene. A line of garments, rippling beside a wide, calm river. the air heavy with warmth, voices low. The soft brushing of hands on cloth, a rhythm that has not entirely vanished, even now. Ash, fat, and the birth of soap. Somewhere around 200–800 BCE, perhaps in ancient Babylon, an accident occurred, or perhaps an experiment. Fat and ash, mixed together during cooking or sacrificial fires, were found to have cleansing power. Archaeological tablets from Babylon mention a mixture of fats, boiled with ashes, the earliest record of soap. This simple reaction between animal fat and plant ash created soap's essential ingredient, alkali salts of fatty acid. From that point on, the story of laundry would never be the same. Soap spread slowly through trade, conquest, and curiosity. The Egyptians refined it with oils from castor and moringa. The Phoenicians learned to make hard soap using goat fat and wood ash. By the time of the Romans, soap was known but not yet widely used for washing clothes. It was still more common as a treatment for skin or hair. But the principle had been born that cleanliness could come not only from water and friction, but from chemistry. When we look back on those distant centuries, the washermen of Egypt, the fullers of Rome, the dhobies of India, we find not only history, but humanity. Laundry in its oldest form was slow. It required attention. It carried a rhythm that matched the pace of the natural world. Water flowing, hands moving, fabric drying in sunlight. It was a task that demanded time, but also gave time to think, to talk, to rest between rinses. And perhaps that is why, even today, the hum of a washing machine, steady and repetitive, feels strangely soothing. Somewhere deep within it, we still hear the echo of rivers and stones, of hands at work beneath the sun, long before electricity. And so, as the ancient world fades behind us, we move quietly forward to the next age of washing, where soap will harden, basins will deepen, and the rhythm of labor will continue, slowly reshaped by centuries of habit and invention. In the next chapter, we'll step softly into the medieval world, where washing became both a duty and a ritual, and where soap, as we know it, finally took form. Soap and stone, medieval Europe's wash day. If you close your eyes for a moment and imagine the medieval world, you might first see castles and fields, knights and peasants, cloisters and winding streets. But hidden behind those larger stories, behind the clang of metal and the chanting of prayers, there was another rhythm, a softer one, the rhythm of daily life. And among those quiet labors, none was more ordinary, more constant, or more quietly necessary than the act of washing. Laundry in medieval Europe was not a simple task. It was a ritual of work, of patience, and of endurance. The clean scent of soap was a luxury, the touch of fresh linen, a rare comfort. Washing was done not with machines, nor even with ease, but with fire, water, and the weight of human hands. So tonight, let's step into that world together, slowly, calmly, and see how people centuries ago kept their garments and linens clean. The setting of the medieval wash. It is early morning. The light is gray and uncertain, spreading slowly over a thatched village. Smoke rises from the hearths of cottages, curling into the mist. In the distance, the faint rush of a stream can be heard. The same stream where perhaps once a week or once a month, the women of the village gather to wash. Laundry was not a daily activity in the medieval world. Clothes were valuable, often few in number, and washing them too often could wear them thin. For peasants, washing might mean only once every few weeks, or when dirt or smell demanded it. For the wealthier, it was more regular, part of the maintenance of household order, but still laborious. The work often began indoors, near the hearth, in preparation. Water had to be heated, a process that could take hours, as buckets were carried from wells or rivers to large iron or copper cauldrons. Firewood had to be gathered. Ashes were sifted to prepare lye, the primitive but effective soap of the time. And always, there was planning. Medieval people lived by rhythms, the rhythm of sunlight, of seasons, of holy days. Wash days were chosen carefully, often on Mondays or Tuesdays, so that drying could happen under midweek sun. Some monastic houses and noble estates kept precise laundry calendars, assigning particular days for linen, for tablecloths, or for bedsheets. To imagine it is to imagine slowness, a kind of patient repetition, the steady filling of buckets, the quiet crackle of fire, the soft hiss as water begins to boil. Water, ash, and soap. Soap, as we think of it as solid bar with lather and scent, was still rare and precious in early medieval Europe. But its ancestors had already arrived. The Romans had known soap. The knowledge had lingered, and by the 8th or 9th century, soap making was practiced again in parts of Italy, Spain, and France. The earliest medieval soap was coarse and gray, made from animal fats and lye, a caustic liquid produced by leaching water through wood ash. It was not gentle, but it worked. To make lye, ash from the hearth, often oak or beech wood, was collected and soaked in rainwater. The water, filtered through the ash, became alkaline. When this solution was boiled with fat, tallow from cows, or sometimes lard, a crude soap would form as the mixture thickened and cooled. The result was soft, sometimes harsh, and slightly oily, but effective at cutting through grease and soil. In monasteries, soap making became a quiet art. Monks needed to keep their linens pure and their garments clean, especially in orders that valued austerity and ritual cleanliness. In the records of the Abbey of Cluny, and others, soap is mentioned among the household stores, sometimes perfumed with herbs or stored in small blocks. It was valuable enough to be counted. For ordinary people, however, soap was a rarity. Most peasants washed with lye water alone, or with clay, sand, or even fermented urine, the same ammonia-rich substance that Roman fullers once used. In some northern regions they used buckings, a process of soaking linen in warm lye, then rinsing it again and again until it whitened. The word laundry itself has roots in these older practices. It comes from the Latin lavare, to wash, the same root that gives us lavatory, but the medieval washer would not have recognized the modern idea of a laundry room. Their work was done outside or in simple stone basins in cold air and open space. Communal rivers and village streams. The river, in medieval life, was a place of both necessity and companionship. There, women gathered to wash, talk, and share the slow rhythm of labor. They carried with them heavy baskets of linens, coarse wool garments, rough spun tunics, linen shirts or bedclothes stained by use. Wooden paddles and flat stones served as tools. The process began with soaking. The garments were plunged into the water, weighed down with stones, left to loosen their dirt. Then came the beating, fabric laid against rock, struck rhythmically with paddles or simply twisted and slapped against the surface of the water. The sound, soft, repetitive, echoing off the riverbank, was familiar to every village. For large households, washing could take a full day or more. The water grew murky, the air damp. Children sometimes helped, fetching buckets, turning garments, or spreading clean linen on bushes or grass to dry. In southern regions, Italy, Spain, the south of France, where sun was stronger, washing was a more regular task. Public washhouses, or lavoir, eventually appeared, covered basins fed by springs or aqueducts. They became centers of community life. The lavoir was both a workplace and a social space, where gossip, advice, and local news flowed as steadily as the water itself. It is worth pausing to imagine that sound, not the mechanical hum of modern machines, but the quiet percussion of water and cloth, a soft, slow music of work, shared in company. The washing of the wealthy. In castles and manor houses, the scale and refinement of laundry grew more elaborate. A noble household could contain dozens of beds, tables, and servants. and each of these produced linens that required care. Fine linen sheets were symbols of status. They were bleached white, embroidered at the edges, and scented with herbs such as lavender, rosemary, or orris root. The care of these linens fell to laundresses, often women of skill and trust, supervised by a laundress of the chamber or washer of the hall. Their duties were recorded in household manuals and account books. One of the most detailed descriptions survives from England in the 15th century, in the household ordinances of the Duke of Buckingham, which note the responsibilities of our laundress in washing our sheets, table napery, and other necessary stuff. The work was methodical. Dirty linens were sorted and soaked overnight in warm water with lye. They were then boiled, sometimes in great coppers, stirred with wooden poles, and rinsed in clean water. After boiling, the fabric was lifted out carefully with long tongs, wrung by hand and carried out to dry on hedges, lines, or frames. To whiten the cloth further, laundresses spread it on grassy fields to bleach under the sun. This was called crofting, or field bleaching, and it could take days. The linen was periodically sprinkled with water to prevent scorching and to enhance the whitening effect. Wealthy estates often had their own bleaching greens, level patches of turf reserved for this purpose. Inside castles, soap was made or imported. By the 13th century, Marseille in France, and later Savona and Genoa in Italy, became centers of fine soap making, using olive oil instead of animal fat. This Castile soap, pale, hard, and lightly perfumed, was prized throughout Europe. For the upper classes, to wash with olive oil soap was both practical and luxurious. It cleaned without harshness, and left a faint, pleasant scent. But even with finer materials, the process remained laborious. The weight of wet linen was immense. Lifting, wringing, and folding it required strength. And because all drying depended on weather, laundry work was always bound to the sky, the mood of clouds, the generosity of sun. The monastic laundry. In monasteries and convents, laundry held spiritual as well as practical meaning. Cleanliness was tied to discipline and purity. Monks washed their robes regularly, and the laundry rooms, often called lavatoria, were designed with precision. The lavatorium was a space of stone basins and troughs, sometimes built near the cloister garden. Water flowed constantly, drawn from streams or aqueducts. Soap, made within the monastery, was kept in clay pots. The act of washing was often done in silence, accompanied by quiet prayer. For some orders, like the Cistercians, cleanliness was a visible expression of inner order. They emphasized simple, unadorned white habits, and so laundry was part of their rhythm of obedience. Once a week, perhaps on Saturdays, robes were washed, rinsed, and laid out on stone walls to dry. The sight of fluttering white cloth in the sun became, in its way, an emblem of monastic life, stillness, and purity in motion. Clothes, fabrics, and stains. Medieval clothing was made of natural materials: linen, wool, hemp, and, for the rich, silk. Each required different care. Linen could be boiled and bleached. Wool, however, would shrink or felt if treated too harshly. Woolen garments were therefore brushed and spot-cleaned more often than washed fully. Stains were treated with whatever local remedies people had discovered: stale urine, vinegar, breadcrumbs, clay, or even wine. Grease might be drawn out with ashes or chalk. Blood with salt water. Every region had its own recipes, often passed down orally. Because soap was scarce and expensive, people also relied heavily on preventive measures. Undergarments made of linen served to absorb sweat and oils, protecting the outer garment. These underclothes could be washed more frequently, while the outer layers, often of wool or silk, were spared from the wash as long as possible. This layering of clean linen beneath heavier cloth became a distinctive feature of European dress. It kept the body fresh and the visible garments cleaner for longer. It was, in essence, an early form of practical hygiene. The scent of clean. To be clean in medieval Europe was as much about fragrance as about appearance. When washing was done, garments and linens were often scented with herbs. Dried lavender, mint, thyme, or rosemary were placed between folds. Cloths were sometimes smoked over fragrant wood or sprinkled with rose water. This was not simply indulgence. In an age before germ theory, scent was believed to carry health, to ward off bad airs, or miasmas. A pleasant-smelling garment was thought to protect its wearer. In royal inventories, lists of perfumed cloths appear alongside jewels and plate. For common households, the fragrance was simpler, the clean scent of air-dried linen, sun-warmed and crisp. That smell, though unrecorded, might have been one of the few pure luxuries of peasant life, the quiet comfort of fabric, dried by wind, the hardness of labor. When we speak of medieval washing, it's easy to focus on materials and methods. But behind every description was immense labor. A single wash could take an entire day of carrying, boiling, beating, wringing, drying, and folding. Hands became raw, cracked by lye and water. Shoulders ached from lifting. Winter washing was done in near-freezing rivers. Summer washing under heavy heat. There were no shortcuts, no valves, no hoses, no pumps. Water had to be fetched, bucket by bucket. Firewood had to be chopped and carried. Everything depended on endurance. In cities, professional washerwomen, lavandières in French, laundresses in English, offered their services for pay. They hauled bundles across streets, washed by riversides, and carried clean garments back again. Their lives were hard, their pay modest, but they were indispensable. A 14th century poem from France calls the washerwoman the friend of cleanliness, the bringer of freshness to the weary. It was quiet praise, but sincere. A day's end. At the end of a wash day, the scene softened. Clean linens hung from hedges, pale in the fading light. The smell of damp fabric mingled with the smoke of evening fires. The river, now calm again, reflected the last light of the sky. In cottages, garments were folded carefully, stored in chests of oak or pine. Soap, if there was any left, was wrapped and kept dry for next time. The washer's hands, reddened and sore, were rubbed with tallow or oil. There was satisfaction in completion, not excitement, but relief. The work was done. The house, for a brief time, was filled with the scent of clean cloth. And in monasteries, the same quiet sense of order. Folded robes, washed towels. The whisper of fabric marked the close of another week. The whisper of continuity. Laundry in medieval Europe was never considered glamorous, yet it shaped daily life, class, and even gender roles. It was a woman's work, a servant's duty, a monastic discipline, a craft of necessity. It bridged the worlds of the poor and the rich, the lay and the religious, the domestic and the sacred. And through all of it, the same tools appeared again and again: water, ash, stone and sun, simple things, unchanging things. Even now, when we drop our clothes into humming machines, we are connected, faintly, to those medieval riversides. The principle is the same: to renew through water, to cleanse, to begin again. The medieval world gave us the foundations of soap, the order of wash days, and the quiet endurance of the laundress. But beyond it lay change, the slow movement towards something more organized, more industrial, yet still rooted in rhythm and repetition. In the next chapter, we'll step gently into the 18th century, to the world of linen, labor, and the early washhouse, where washing became a profession and where the hum of progress began to stir, though still softly, still by hand. Linen, labor, and the 18th century washhouse. The 18th century was a world of fabric and fragrance, of hearth smoke and soap bubbles, of quiet hands that kept entire households running. It was an age between eras, before electricity, yet after the slow experiments of the medieval world. Here, washing was no longer merely survival. It was rhythm, profession, and pride. In the faint echo of a washboard we can hear a society in transition, still bound to water and fire, but dreaming faintly of the future hum of machines. Let us begin, as always, at dawn. The morning of wash day. The first light slips through narrow windows. The air is cool, still carrying the scent of wood smoke and dew. In the servants' quarters of an English manor house, movement begins before the sun is fully risen. A girl, perhaps 16 or 17, stirs from a straw mattress, rubbing sleep from her eyes. She is a laundry maid, one of many in a large household. Her hands are red and rough, even at this young age. Today is wash day, and she knows it will stretch from morning until night. In the kitchen below, the cook's fire has already been lit. Great iron pots stand ready, blackened with years of use. Buckets of water, drawn from the well, wait by the door. A faint chill lingers as she steps outside to fetch more, the wooden handle biting into her palms. This was how the 18th century greeted its laundresses, not with luxury but with necessity. Washing was a task that dominated the week, and for larger households, sometimes the entire household revolved around it. The phrase Blue Monday, still used in some places today, was born from those wash days. On Monday mornings, servants and washerwomen began the week's cleaning. Tuesday was for drying and starching. Wednesday for ironing. The rhythm of labor stretched predictably across the days, as certain as the chime of church bells. The servants' world. For the middle and upper classes, the smooth whiteness of linen was a mark of refinement. Clean shirts, crisp sheets, polished napkins, these spoke not only of cleanliness, but of control. To keep white linen, truly white, required knowledge, care, and the hidden labor of many hands. The laundry-maid was usually a lower servant, ranked below the cook and the housemaid, yet her role was indispensable. She was responsible for the household's linens, sheets, tablecloths, towels, and the gentlemen's shirts, all of which had to be kept spotless. Her workspace, the washhouse, stood apart from the main building to keep steam and smells away. Inside were great coppers built into brickwork, filled by buckets and heated by fire beneath. There were tubs for rinsing, benches for scrubbing, lines strung across rafters for hanging clothes to drip. The floor was wet, the air thick with vapor, the sound rhythmic slosh, ring, slap, rinse. To keep pace, laundry maids worked in pairs or small groups. The day's tasks were divided. One fed the fire and managed boiling, another scrubbed with soap. A third rinsed and wrung. The heaviest work came when the linen was lifted, dripping and scalding from the copper steaming clouds rising into the rafters. They talked softly as they worked, sometimes humming hymns or simple folk tunes. The sound of women's voices, mixed with the gentle roar of fire and the sigh of water, made a quiet human music, a pulse of everyday life rarely recorded in books, but constant in reality. Soap and the art of cleanliness. By the 18th century, soap making had become an established craft. Across Europe, soap was now produced commercially, in Marseille, in Castile, in London, in Bristol. These soaps were firmer, smoother, and better refined than the rough, greasy cakes of earlier centuries. Good soap was prized, and its quality depended on its ingredients. The best was made from olive oil, or tallow, boiled with lye in great copper vats. The finished blocks were left to cure, cut into squares, and sold by the pound. In the washhouse, however, not all soap was fine. Servants used what the household could afford, often rough domestic soap, made from kitchen fats, saved over weeks. It smelled faintly of ash and smoke, sometimes sharp with alkali, sometimes softened with herbs. When rubbed against linen, it gave off a creamy, slow lather, the sign of its effectiveness. Soap was used not only for washing, but for whitening. To achieve that pure, almost glowing linen so admired in the 18th century. Laundresses soaked the fabric in warm soapy water, then boiled it, sometimes with a touch of bluing, a blue dye that countered the natural yellowing of cloth. Hence the expression blue-white linen, the ideal of crisp, radiant cleanliness that dominated the century's domestic imagination. The washerwomen of the city, beyond the manor walls. Laundry was also a profession, one of the few that women could pursue independently. In every town there were washerwomen, sturdy, determined figures who carried bundles through the streets in wicker baskets or on their heads, who washed by riverbanks or in small public washhouses. They were paid by the piece, a few coins for each shirt, each sheet, each pair of stockings. A washerwoman's life was hard, but it offered a kind of freedom. She worked long hours, but she was her own master. She could choose her clients, set her pace, and find a quiet satisfaction in the steady rhythm of her labor. Contemporary diaries and letters often mention my washerwomen with a kind of respectful familiarity, part of the fabric of everyday life. Some even became minor local figures, known for their reliability or for the fresh scent of their work. In London, in Paris, in Dublin, washerwomen formed informal guilds or networks, helping each other on large jobs. They gathered near water, the Seine, the Thames, the Liffey, their skirts hitched up, their sleeves rolled to the elbow, beating and rinsing in rhythm. It was exhausting, repetitive, and often cold work, but it gave life to entire neighborhoods. The rivers carried not only water but conversation, laughter, and the shared endurance of those who labored together. The domestic hierarchy of linen. In the households of the well-to-do, linen was wealth. Inventories listed dozens, sometimes hundreds of sheets, napkins, towels, pillowcases, shirts and chemise. Each was numbered, marked with initials, folded, and stored in a linen press, often under lock and key. The laundry maid or linen maid was entrusted with keeping this order. She knew the state of every sheet, the repairs needed, the stains to be removed. Each piece was part of a cycle, used, washed, dried, ironed, and returned. The process began with sorting. Fine linens, those worn close to the skin or used at table, were separated from coarse ones. The finest might be boiled twice, bleached in the sun and ironed between muslin cloth. Coarser items were scrubbed vigorously and dried on lines or bushes. Ironing, too, was an art. Flat irons, heated on the hearth, were used in pairs, one heating while the other worked. The movement was steady and unhurried. Press, lift, shift, smooth. Starch was made from wheat or rice, boiled and strained, then dabbed on cuffs, collars and ruffles to keep them stiff and bright. Each garment, when finished, bore the quiet signature of skill, folds sharp, fabric smooth, scent faintly clean. It was invisible labor, yet it defined the appearance of everyone who wore the result. Water, heat, and weather. The practicalities of washing still governed everything. There were no pipes, no running taps, no mechanical wringers. Every bucket of water was carried, every fire tended by hand. In winter, the work was brutal. Hands plunged into icy water, garments frozen stiff as they hung to dry. In summer, the heat could be overwhelming. Steam filled the washhouse, and the air shimmered. Rain was both friend and enemy. Welcome for soaking, disastrous for drying. A week of wet weather could throw a household's schedule into disarray. Sheets might sour, garments, mildew, starch, lose its stiffness. To counter this, some estates built covered drying rooms, long lofts with high windows and ropes stretched across. Here, in filtered light, linens hung in gentle rows, like pale sails catching a quiet wind. The air smelled of soap, damp cloth, and faint wood smoke. A scent of domestic calm that must have been oddly comforting. Cleanliness and class. Clean linen became one of the great social symbols of the 18th century. The ability to wear a fresh shirt daily, or to sleep on white sheets, marked a person as refined, respectable, and modern. Writers of the time often linked cleanliness with virtue. A gentleman's white cuffs and collar reflected not only hygiene but moral order. A well-kept household, with neatly folded linens, spoke of discipline and good management. For the working classes, maintaining cleanliness was more difficult, yet still valued. Even the poorest washerwoman tried to keep a single set of Sunday-best garments, scrubbed, patched, and carefully stored for rest days or church. Thus, laundry connected all levels of society. It was both a dividing line and a bridge, separating rich from poor in means, but uniting them in necessity. Everyone sooner or later faced the same questions: how to clean, how to dry, how to keep things pure in a world of dust and labor. The rise of the washhouse. By the later 18th century, cities began to recognize the importance of public washhouses, partly for hygiene, partly for efficiency. In France, communal lavoirs, many of which still stand, became civic institutions. Fed by clean springs, they provided sheltered spaces where women could wash year-round. Some were even designed with architectural grace: stone columns, tiled roofs, basins arranged like cloisters. In England and Germany, similar spaces appeared, often attached to almshouses or hospitals, where linen needed constant cleaning. These early washhouses were precursors to what the Victorians would later expand into vast steam-powered laundries. But for now, in the 1700s, the process remained mostly manual, guided by tradition, strengthened by habit, unchanged in its essence since the Middle Ages. The scent of the 18th century washday. What did it smell like? This world of water and soap, not sterile, not perfumed, but layered, like the scent of life itself. There was the sharp tang of lye, the faint sweetness of boiling starch, the earthy smell of damp linen, the warmth of the fire, the clean grass where sheets lay bleaching. Sometimes lavender, sometimes lemon peel, sometimes nothing but the smell of pure air. After hours of work, when the linens were hung and the floor swept, the washhouse grew quiet again. The water in the tubs turned still. The last rays of light slanted through the windows, striking on the pale folds that hung above. For a moment the scene might seem almost sacred. The whiteness of cloth, the hush of evening, the satisfaction of work done well. The human thread. If one stood outside a town in those days, one could see, across fields and fences, long lines of linen fluttering like flags. That sight, ordinary yet beautiful, was one of the quiet emblems of 18th century life. Each piece represented human effort: a maid's sore hands, a washerwoman's aching back, the weight of a life spent in rhythm with the weather. Yet there was pride in it too. Clean linen was a badge of dignity, and the work behind it carried its own quiet grace. The Enlightenment age is often remembered for its philosophers and discoveries, but in the small corners of daily life, the washtub, the drying line, the folded sheet, we see another kind of enlightenment: the rise of cleanliness as comfort, of order as peace, of domestic labor as a hidden art. Foreshadowing the machine. By the century's close, subtle changes were stirring. Small mechanical aids appeared: hand-cranked rollers to wring out water, simple washboards to aid scrubbing. Soap production grew, prices dropped, and advertisements began to appear for improved household aids. The rhythm of washing was still slow, but its future was already humming quietly, waiting. The sound of hands would one day give way to the turn of gears. For now, though, the 18th century remained human. The washhouse was alive with breath and conversation. The steady drip of water, the soft creak of wood, the faint sigh of steam. It was in its way peaceful, a place where time stretched long and evening quiet. As night fell on wash day, the servants rested, weary but calm. The lines outside the washhouse sagged gently under their weight of clean linen. The air cooled, and the stars came out, reflecting in small pools left by spilled buckets. Inside, the fire glowed low. The copper pot stood empty, sides dark with soot. Soap scraps floated in the last inch of water. A broom leaned against the wall. The silence, after a day of noise and movement, was deep and satisfying. Perhaps the laundry maid sat for a moment before returning to her quarters, her hands folded in her lap, her body heavy with fatigue, her mind already half in dreams. She had touched every part of the household that day, though her name might never be spoken in the master's hall. She had made the house clean, and in the soft night air that seemed in the 18th century left behind more than soap and starch. It gave us the idea that washing could be improved, that comfort, convenience, and efficiency were worth pursuing. In the next chapter, we will move slowly forward into the 19th century, where laundry left the hearth and the riverbank to enter workshops and factories. The story will grow louder, with the hiss of steam and the rhythm of iron wheels, but for now let us rest here, in the fading quiet of the washhouse, as the linen dries in the evening breeze. The industrial shift, steam, soap, and the birth of the modern wash. The story of washing now moves into a century of invention, the 19th century, when quiet human rhythm met the mechanical pulse of progress. For centuries, washing had been a matter of hand and water, of soap, muscle, and patience. But as steam filled the air of factories and gears began to turn, the art of laundry found itself on the threshold of transformation. This is the century where the washtub met the engine, where copper cauldrons gave way to boilers, where the washerwoman's beat on the stone was echoed by the churning of machines. And yet through all of it, the same simple goal endured: the pursuit of cleanliness, calm, pure, and deeply human. A world ready for change. The early 1800s were years of restless invention. Across Europe and America, steam had become the symbol of modern life. The Industrial Revolution was no longer a theory. It was a sound, the steady hiss of pipes, the hum of engines, the rhythm of progress. Laundry, humble though it seemed, was not exempt from this new ambition. The old methods, boiling, scrubbing, wringing, still ruled most homes. But cities were growing larger, households busier, and time itself seemed to move faster. The washing that once filled one quiet day a week was becoming a burden in an age of efficiency. Inventors, tinkerers, and engineers began to look toward the washtub with the same curiosity they had once given to looms and plows. They asked, could washing be improved? Could it be mechanized, even industrialized? The 19th century's answer would be yes, though slowly, and often imperfectly at first. The first washing machines. The very idea of a washing machine did not appear suddenly. It evolved through small, often obscure experiments, a progression of clever ideas, wooden prototypes, and quiet patents. In 1797, an American named Nathaniel Briggs filed one of the first known patents for a washing machine in New Hampshire. His design was simple: a box filled with water and soap, where clothes were agitated by hand. The patent itself was later lost in a fire at the U.S. Patent Office, but the concept survived and inspired others. By the early 1800s, inventors in Europe began designing wooden washing drums, cylindrical tubs turned by hand or with cranks. In 1827, an English patent by James King described a rotating drum, remarkably similar to what would later become the standard washing machine shape. These early devices did not truly wash in the modern sense. They merely helped move the linen through soapy water, imitating the repetitive motion of scrubbing and beating. The designs were rustic: wooden barrels mounted on frames, handles attached to turn them, gears creaking, water sloshing. Yet to anyone used to the endless toil of manual washing, they must have seemed miraculous. The crank and the drum. By the 1840s, mechanical imagination had fully embraced laundry. The hand-cranked drum washer became a common feature in advertisements and catalogs, especially in Britain and the United States. The most successful designs combined rotation and agitation, a rhythm both circular and back and forth, mimicking human motion more efficiently. One popular design featured an internal paddle fixed within the barrel. As the handle turned, the paddle stirred the water and linen together, gently beating out dirt. Others included dashers, wooden plungers moved up and down to create suction and flow. These devices still required effort, but they reduced fatigue. A woman could stand upright, turning a crank instead of kneeling or bending. The load was heavier, the water hotter, but the motion was mechanical, predictable, steady. The sound of washing changed too. The slosh and splash were now joined by the slow creak of wood and metal, the rhythmic clatter of cogs. In these sounds, the domestic world was taking its first steps toward the age of machine. The arrival of the wringer. If one invention defined the mid-19th century laundry, it was not the washer, but the wringer. Before the wringer, clothes were twisted by hand to remove rubber, a slow and painful process. Wet linen is heavy, and twisting it by hand can strain wrists and arms. Around 1843, inventors began experimenting with paired rollers. When fabric was passed between them and the handle was turned, the rollers squeezed out water, leaving the linen damp but no longer dripping. By 1850, wringers were being sold widely. They were often clamped to tubs, made of iron and wood, with rubber or cloth-covered rollers. Women praised them for saving time, sometimes cutting drying hours in half. The wringer became so indispensable that many households bought one even before they could afford a full washer. Its design, simple and elegant, endured well into the next century. The gentle turn of the handle, the steady squeeze of the rollers, the trickle of water falling into the bucket, all these became part of the new soundscape of public steam laundries. While domestic tools were improving, another revolution was taking place outside the home. In the 1840s and 1850s, urban laundries began adopting steam power. What had once been a purely manual craft was becoming industrialized. Large boilers heated water and generated steam, which in turn powered machinery for washing, wringing, and drying. These steam laundries were among the first truly mechanized cleaning establishments. They could handle hundreds of garments at once, processing them through a series of machines. Washers, wringers, dryers, and even mangles, large, flat rollers used to smooth sheets and tablecloth. A typical steam laundry in London, Paris, or New York was a place of constant motion. Iron pipes hissed softly, belts turned overhead, and the air was thick with heat and humidity. Workers, mostly women, moved methodically between machines, tending to the flow of linen as it passed from one stage to the next. Though the labor remained hard, it was different now, less individual, more coordinated, more mechanical. The world of washing had entered the industrial age. Soap becomes science. Soap, too, was transformed by industry. In the early 19th century, soap making was still a domestic or small-scale trade. But as demand grew, driven by both population and cleanliness culture, manufacturers began producing soap on a massive scale. By the 1850s, soap was a commodity. Factories in Britain, France, and the United States turned out bars by the ton. Advertisements appeared in newspapers extolling the virtues of pure, refined, or family soaps. Two scientific developments changed everything. First was the discovery that alkalis, such as sodium carbonate, produced from salt through the Leblanc process, could be manufactured cheaply. This made large-scale soap production possible. Second was chemistry itself. Scientists began to study the molecular nature of fats and oils, understanding why they cleaned and how they could be improved. By the late 19th century, soap making was no longer a mystery, but a science, part of the broader movement that brought chemistry into the home. The result was cleaner, more consistent soap, its texture smoother, its scent more pleasant. It lathered easily and washed away completely. A small but profound improvement in daily life. The mangle and the iron. Laundry's industrial transformation extended to finishing as well. The mangle, a large rolling press, had existed since the 17th century, but it became more sophisticated in the 19th. Steam mangles appeared in commercial laundries, capable of smoothing vast sheets and tablecloths in seconds. For smaller households, hand-cranked mangles remained common. Heavy wooden frames with iron rollers, turned by a handle. These could both dry and smooth linen, giving it the crispness so prized in the era of starch and polish. The iron, too, evolved. Traditional flat irons were heated directly on stoves, but by the late 1800s, box irons filled with hot coals and gas irons began to appear. Some inventors even experimented with early electric irons by the 1890s. Each of these inventions contributed to a new aesthetic of cleanliness. Garments, not only clean but smooth, structured, immaculate. The freshly washed shirt, the gleaming tablecloth, the spotless sheet, all became quiet emblems of the industrial home. The domestic machine arrives. By the 1870s and 1880s, washing machines began to resemble what we recognize today. Metal replaced wood. Gears improved, and mechanical efficiency increased. In 1858, Hamilton Smith patented a rotary washing machine with a drum that could reverse direction, an important innovation that improved cleaning performance. Later, in 1874, William Blackstone built a machine as a birthday gift for his wife, a gesture often cited as the first example of a machine designed specifically for home use. These machines remained hand-operated, but they were sturdier and more compact. They appeared in catalogs alongside sewing machines and churns, part of a growing fascination with household technology. Manufacturers gave them hopeful names: the Easy Washer, the Triumph, the One. Their advertisements spoke not of drudgery, but of comfort, progress, and care, the modern home's greatest friend. Yet for many women, even these devices remained out of reach. They were expensive, heavy, and often impractical for smaller homes. The true democratization of laundry would wait for electricity. Steam as a symbol. Steam was more than a source of power. It was a symbol of modern life. In the great cities of the 19th century, the very word steam evoked progress. Steam engines drove locomotives, ships, presses, and now laundries. Steam meant control, mastery over heat, water, and time. A steam laundry in full operation was a wonder of order. Huge boilers supplied water at constant temperature. Iron machines turned steadily, their belts humming. Workers moved in sequence, each task timed to the flow of steam. Clean linen emerged not in hours or days, but in measured cycles, a quiet echo of the assembly lines to come. For the first time in history, cleanliness could be mass-produced. Hotels, hospitals, and railways relied on these steam laundries to handle mountains of linen daily. What had once been a private domestic rhythm became a public industrial process. The very smell of steam, warm, metallic, faintly soapy, became part of the new century's sensory world. Chemistry enters the tub. By the late 1800s, the world was preparing for another leap: the rise of synthetic cleaning agents. Soap, though perfected, had its limits. Hard water reduced its effectiveness, and it left residues on fabric. Chemists began to explore alternatives: powders and compounds that worked even in mineral-rich water. In 1876, the German chemist Ernst Solvay refined a process for producing soda ash cheaply, paving the way for modern detergent. By the 1890s, experiments with alkaline salts and silicates led to the first washing powders, precursors to the detergents of the 20th century. These powders dissolved more easily than soap and rinsed away more completely. They also allowed washing to be done at lower temperatures, reducing fuel use and fabric wear. What began as chemistry in a laboratory soon became comfort in the home. The industrial world was not only reshaping machines, but the very materials of cleanliness themselves, changing notions of clean. The 19th century also reshaped the meaning of cleanliness. Before, washing had been periodic, a weekly ritual, often shared among women or done communally. But as technology advanced, cleanliness became constant. Laundry was no longer an occasional task. It became part of daily identity. To be clean was to be modern. To have spotless linen was to belong to the new world of order and progress. This change was moral, as much as mechanical. Public health movements, urban sanitation projects, and the language of purity intertwined with cleanliness. Soap advertisements spoke of hygiene and virtue, not merely of dirt removal. The industrial machine, in its quiet way, had altered human self-perception, teaching society to see cleanliness as civilization itself. Evening at the steam laundry. Imagine the closing hour of a steam laundry in 1880. The great boilers are cooling, their hiss softening. The day's final sheets hang drying on racks. Workers move quietly, wiping surfaces, folding cloth, tidying piles of linen. The floor is damp, the air heavy with warmth. Through the windows, twilight settles over brick streets. The outside world is soot-streaked, noisy, alive with carriages and the clatter of hooves. Inside, the rhythm slows. Somewhere, a machine creaks to a stop. The silence that follows feels immense, filled only by the faint drip of water from a pipe. For the women who worked here, the day was long and the labor unending. But the pride was real. Clean linen left their hands ready for hospitals, hotels, ships, carrying the unseen mark of their diligence out into the world. The steam fades, the doors close, and for a few quiet hours, even the machines seem to rest, foreshadowing the electric age. By the century's end, inventors were already dreaming of electricity. Small electric motors began to appear in the 1880s, and by 1900, experimental electric washers existed, though still rare and costly. The new century would bring rapid change, powered agitators, spin cycles, and automatic draining. But for the moment, at the close of the 19th century, the world still stood in balance, half traditional, half modern. The copper pot and the steam drum coexisted, both serving the same eternal purpose. Water, heat, soap, motion, all the same elements, only now guided by human ingenuity. Looking back, the industrial century did not simply mechanize washing, it redefined it. It turned an ancient task into an industry, a science, and eventually, a symbol of progress. It took the washerwoman's rhythm and multiplied it, not to erase her, but to amplify her work, spreading cleanliness across the new urban world. And yet, if you listen closely, even in the hum of those old machines, you can still hear the ancient rhythm, the water sloshing, the steady turn of hands, the quiet satisfaction of making something clean again. That sound, whether by river, by copper pot, or by steam drum, is the true heartbeat of laundry's long history. In the next chapter, the sound will change again. We will step into the 20th century, where electricity, advertising, and the dream of convenience brought the washing machine into nearly every home. The machines will hum softly, the soaps will sparkle with chemistry, and the quiet labor of centuries will finally meet its mechanical twin, effortless, yet built on everything that came before. For now, though, the steam fades into silence. The industrial washhouse cools in the twilight, and the long story of laundry pauses, once more in peace. The coming of the machine. Imagine the quiet of an early morning kitchen around the turn of the 20th century. The fire is not yet lit, the kettle still cold, and beside the wash basin stands something strange and gleaming. It is squat and metallic. Not unlike a small cauldron, it hums faintly when touched, as if holding a pulse of energy beneath its still surface. This is the beginning of something new. A machine that promises to wash the clothes for you. For centuries, laundry had meant labor, the rhythmic plunge and rub of hands in water, the sting of soap, the bending of the back. It was a full-body act, slow, repetitive, and exhausting. But now, a new companion enters the room, a device of steel and wire with levers and wheels, small enough to fit in the home, yet strange enough to change it entirely. The first washing machines of the early 1900s were simple, clumsy things. They rattled, they leaked, they often demanded as much work as they saved. Yet they held a promise, a whisper that the future might be easier, that the burden of wash day might someday be lifted. And it was that whisper, more than the machine itself, that began to reshape the rhythm of home life. The machine arrives in the home. At first, the machine belonged to everyone, but to the few. They were expensive, fragile, and often sold as curiosities of the modern age. Advertisers called them the electric servant, an idea that felt both marvelous and slightly unsettling. For generations, cleanliness had been the measure of diligence, not technology. It was a woman's devotion, expressed through her care of linens and clothes. Now a metal drum threatened to take her place for the women of the early 20th century. The housewives, the laundresses, the maids. The machine arrived as both relief and disruption. Many greeted it with quiet wonder, watching as it agitated the water and made suds dance without hands. Others regarded it with suspicion, uncertain whether it was safe to trust a motor with one's best linen, or with a husband's starched collar. Still, the idea began to settle into the air, that cleanliness could be achieved not by toil, but by time. Electricity and patience would soon do the work that soap and sweat once did. Wash day without the river. By the 1920s, wash day had begun to shift in meaning. For centuries, it had been an event, a weekly, sometimes bi-weekly ordeal. Water was heated in copper kettles. Soap was grated by hand. Clothes were sorted, soaked, beaten, wrung and hung. Now in the growing suburbs of America and Europe, a woman could close a lid, turn a crank or press a switch, and leave the room. It was a quiet revolution, invisible to the public eye, but profound within the household. Wash day no longer drew women to the riverbanks or to communal yards. It no longer brought together neighbors who shared soap and gossip in the open air. Instead, it was moving indoors, into basements and back rooms, where it became a private ritual. The sound of running water was replaced by the hum of motor. The air, once filled with laughter and chatter, now held a low mechanical rhythm, the turning of a drum, the draining of water. It was cleaner, quieter, and lonely, the dream of effortless living. The 1930s brought advertisements filled with smiling women in neat dresses, standing beside gleaming white enamel washers. The message was not just about cleanliness, but about freedom. Laundry, once the symbol of endless labor, became a symbol of progress, of a life made easier by invention. The ideal home, as imagined in magazines and department store windows, was bright, efficient, and mechanized. And yet, this new promise of effortlessness carried its own demands. A housewife was now expected not only to do the laundry, but to do it perfectly, and to look serene while doing so. The stains must vanish. The whites must glow. The linens must be folded smooth and fresh, as if work itself had been erased. Technology, in its quiet way, had changed the nature of domestic pride. Where once diligence was measured by endurance, it was now measured by results. The electric servant. The earliest electric machines were partly manual. Many required a separate wringer, turned by hand. Some were powered by belts or pedals, and others by small motors attached to tubs of tin or enamel. But each year, the design became smoother. Manufacturers like Maytag, Thor, and Hoover began to compete for attention, not with power or speed, but with ease. Each new model claimed to save more time, to require fewer steps. Some promised hands-free washing. Others boasted self-wringing rollers. By the late 1930s, a few models even drained themselves automatically. For the first time, the home seemed to imitate the factory, not in noise or labor, but in the quiet logic of process. The home became a place where energy, water, and electricity flowed in measured cycles, where laundry, once chaotic and physical, became ordered and invisible. The woman who once stood by the tub, sleeves rolled and muscles aching, now stood by a switch. And in that transformation, her world shifted, slightly, silently, but permanent. A changing kind of labor. To some, the machine truly was a liberation. A housewife with a family of 5 might spend half as much time washing as her mother once did. That extra time could be spent on sewing, cooking, reading, or even resting, though rest was a luxury rarely encouraged. But the story was not so simple. While the washing machine freed women from the harshest physical toil, it also isolated them further within the home. The industrial laundry had once been a shared space, a site of gossip, laughter, and shared hardship. The private machine turned work into solitude. The hum of the motor replaced the murmur of voices. What had once been a social rhythm became a domestic one. The connection between women, between mothers, daughters, and neighbors, thinned as machines took over their collective ritual. Progress had brought comfort, but it had also brought silence. Advertising, the modern woman. In the decades that followed, the image of the housewife was transformed through advertising. Posters and magazine spreads showed her smiling, immaculate, and grateful. Not a worker, but a manager of comfort. Laundry was no longer a test of endurance, but a performance of grace. And yet, behind those polished images, real women continued to navigate the uneasy balance between convenience and expectation. Machines saved time, but they also raised standards. Clothes could now be washed more often, so they had to be. Cleanliness became constant, and the rhythm of the home tightened rather than relaxed. Where a family once accepted that wash day came once a week, the new machines made washing a daily task. Smaller, faster, but never-ending. The rhythm of the new wash day. By the 1950s, the washing machine had become a fixture of modern life. In some homes, it sat proudly in the kitchen, gleaming beside the sink. In others, it hid in a corner of the basement, its steady hum, a kind of mechanical heartbeat. Children grew up knowing that sound, the slosh and spin, the rush of draining water. For them, laundry was not a communal ritual or a mother's ordeal. It was simply part of the quiet machinery of home. As electric dryers appeared, the line between inside and outside blurred even further. The sight of clothes fluttering in the sun began to fade from towns and cities. The world of wash day, once visible and shared, became enclosed, efficient, invisible, and private. Cleanliness had been conquered, but something human had been washed away with the soap. Gender and the machine. For much of the 20th century, the washing machine remained a woman's domain. Even as technology advanced, and as men's work increasingly involved machines outside the home, the association between femininity and domestic care persisted. But the relationship between women and their machines was not one of mere subservience. Many took pride in mastering the new technology, in understanding the rhythms of spin and rinse, in maintaining the delicate balance of soap and water. The machine did not erase labor. It transformed it into something quieter, less visible, but still deeply rooted in care. The washer was no longer a symbol of toil. It became a companion, a subtle extension of human rhythm, humming along with the household's breathing, its cycles blending into the days and weeks. When we think of laundry today, the soft hum behind a closed door, the warmth of clean fabric, the simple press of a button, it's easy to forget how much of human history led to this. Behind every load of fresh clothes lies a lineage of hands, women at riversides, servants in washhouses, workers in steam laundries, and inventors in small workshops. Each contributed in quiet ways to this strange partnership between labor and leisure. The washing machine did not simply clean clothes, it redefined time itself. It gave people, especially women, moments of stillness that had never existed before. Moments to breathe, to rest, to listen to the low turning of a drum, and to feel, perhaps for the first time, that work could continue without the epilogue, a soft hum. As the century turned again, the machine became silent, sleek, and nearly invisible. It now whispers rather than churns, concealed behind panels of glass and chrome, but its rhythm remains. That same slow pulse, the turning of fabric through water, the repeating cycles that mirror the turning of life itself. Laundry, once the loudest of labors, has become a sound of calm, a reminder of continuity. And if you listen closely, beyond the hum, beyond the quiet, you might still hear the echo of older rhythms, the splash of river water, the scrape of stone, the murmur of hands at work. All of it, still turning, still cleansing, in the deep and endless wash of time. Epilogue. The quiet hum of modern laundry. The rhythm continues. It is evening. The world outside has quieted, and within the stillness of a small home, the faint hum of a washing machine begins its slow rotation. The water swirls behind a pane of glass, folding and unfolding soft fabric in its rhythmic, patient dance. It is a sound so ordinary, so familiar, that it barely reaches the conscious mind. Yet in that soft turning, there lingers 1,000 years of memory of riverbanks and washhouses, of steam and soap and sunlight. Laundry, once a labor that consumed entire days, has become a background note in modern life. Continues while we sleep, while we read, while we move through the quiet routines of our homes. It is the faint heartbeat of domestic time, cyclical, constant, and almost invisible. And still, it connects us to the long lineage of hands that worked before ours. The echo of water. If you close your eyes and listen closely, the hum of the modern washer becomes something more elemental. Beneath the motor's steady vibration, you might sense the rhythm of a stream, the alish of fabric against rock, the rush of cold water through fingers numbed by winter. For thousands of years, that was the sound of cleanliness, the living pulse of water meeting cloth, of effort and renewal intertwined. The modern machine, in its quiet imitation of that rhythm, carries the memory of those older gestures. The circle of the drum is the circle of the basin, the spin of the wringer, the endless cycle of soaking, rinsing, and repeating. Though the materials have changed, steel for stone, electricity for muscle, the intention remains the same: to make something clean again, to restore it, to begin anew. In this way, every wash load is a small act of continuity, a quiet echo of humanity's oldest ritual. The invisible work. Today, most people hardly think about the machine that hums in the next room. It is expected, a background presence, unremarkable and constant. But for most of history, cleanliness was where quiet. It was a battle against dirt, sweat, and the weight of labor. The modern washing machine conceals that history beneath its seamless surface. It hides the effort that once defined human days, the hauling of water, the stoking of fires, the wringing and beating of cloth. What once filled entire mornings, even entire lives, has been compressed into a single press of a button. And yet, something curious happens in that silence. The absence of labor creates a kind of space, a pause in the rhythm of the home. It is a space filled not with exhaustion but with reflection. There is still work being done, of course, by heat, water, and movement, but it happens unseen. The human hand, once essential, has stepped back. The machine has taken its place, carrying the burden with a soft, mechanical grace. It is not servitude, nor magic. merely the patient continuation of what humanity began beside the first river. Laundry as memory. Laundry has always been intimate work. It passes through the hands the things that touch us most closely. Our garments, our linens, the fabric that holds the warmth of our bodies, and the trace of our days. To wash them is to renew them. And in that renewal, there is tenderness. In older times, a mother might have known each garment by feel, the texture of her husband's collar, the wear of a child's sleeve. Today, the contact is more fleeting, but the gesture remains. The sorting, the folding, the faint scent of clean cotton. As it's lifted from the machine, every household carries this rhythm in its own quiet way. The washer hums, the dryer sighs, the clothes are folded and put away. Each cycle marks the passage of another week, another turn of ordinary life. It is, in its simplicity, a ritual of care, one that connects us not only to the past, but to one another, the machine as companion. There's something curiously comforting about the washing machine's sound. It is repetitive, gentle, and predictable, a low pulse of order within the small uncertainties of daily life. Some people even fall asleep to it, lulled by its slow rotation and the soft slosh of water against fabric. In that rhythm, there's a sense of reassurance. The machine does not hurry. It does not complain. It works in cycles, steady and unending, much like the beating of the human heart. In a way, it has become a modern hearth, a quiet center of warmth and motion, keeping the household turning through the days and seasons. It is no longer the focus of labor, as it once was, but the sound of rest, a reminder that something is being cared for, even while we pause, the weight of time. When we trace the story of laundry, from riverbanks to basements, from hands to machines, we are really tracing the story of time, how we measure it, how we spend it, how we reclaim it. In the past, time was something laundry consumed. It took entire days, whole weeks. Families organized their routines around it. Today, time has shifted. The hours once spent on washing are now filled with other labors, or sometimes, blessedly, with nothing at all. The washing machine gave people a small fragment of freedom, moments to rest, to think, to simply be. And though the machine itself is mechanical, what it returned to us was deeply human. The chance to breathe between tasks, to feel that the endless work of living could for once continue without our constant effort. If you listen now, wherever you are, perhaps there's a machine humming nearby. Perhaps it's washing a few shirts, or the week's linens, or the soft sheets that will soon cradle you to sleep. It is easy to forget that this ordinary moment stands on the shoulders of centuries of washerwomen and housewives, of tanners and servants, of inventors and engineers. Each one added a turn to the great wheel of progress that now spins so quietly beside it. The modern washing machine does not boast or strain. It simply turns patient, enduring, and calm. Its sound is a small reminder of continuity, of care carried forward through generations. And in that gentle rhythm, there is something almost ancient, a steady reassurance that the world, however changed, still moves in cycles, cleaning, renewing, beginning again. The last cycle. As the final spin slows and the water drains away, the air grows still once more. The clothes rest, warm and clean, folded into silence. And perhaps that is the truest gift of this long evolution. Not just cleanliness, but peace. The quiet satisfaction of something completed, something renewed. Laundry began as struggle and ended as serenity. It became a meditation, a sound to fall asleep to. So, as you rest, imagine the faint hum of the washer continuing somewhere in the distance, steady, rhythmic, eternal. Each rotation, another heartbeat in the long story of human hands and human time. Still washing, still turning, still cleaning.